Have I read Hegel? No. I don't plan on reading Hegel either. I think that, I don't know, like I'm trying to make like economic investments into who I read and when. I try not to like overcommit in my reading to somebody who's going to take like, 3 fucking years to read just for me to like end up like disagreeing with them. I don't know. It's like a question of like, what am I going to get out of like doing the reading? And I just don't think that Hegel, like reading Hegel, like I just don't think that it has like, I don't think that it has like the offer that I'm really looking for. But make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends to know that good stuff. And that will go to the very first guest. Oop. Paul, did you want to come in? I feel like I've seen you in like a request like a couple of times. If you want to get on in, maybe it was like a mistake. I haven't even read Lacan. I've read like a lot of like the secondary literature. I wouldn't even say like a lot. I've just read like enough secondary literature of Lacan to kind of like have like a general idea about what he's getting at. And I don't know if I'd say like what Lacan is talking about is true, but I definitely think it's useful. It's like a good way to evaluate like a lot of your recurring problems, and these sorts of themes come up genuinely all of the time. Sorry, Dingo. I've been solo maxing as of late. Also, I'm pretty sure this Bug Life person, pretty sure this is Banjo guy. We were worried about you. We didn't know where you were or what you were up to. We were so nervous. I was like worried that something bad happened to you. Listen, I want you to stay safe out there. Make sure, if you're in that guest request box, that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. I also ask that you have some sort of reason to think that God exists. Yeah, make sure you're doing all that good stuff. Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Yep, how old are you?
I'm 53, and I just heard you say make sure you believe in the God of the Bible, so I apologize.
Or like the Torah or the Quran. I don't know. When you say that you believe in God, what do you believe in?
No, that's the issue. I just heard that. But can I just say one thing to you?
Mm-hmm.
I saw you, it's probably been a little over a year ago. You were the very first deconstructing live that I saw. I thought you were an asshole. Not gonna lie. And I fought to come up because I was like, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. But I listened, and my husband was like, why are you listening to that? And I'm like, well, he has valid things that he's saying. You were literally the first person that started my deconstruction journey.
Whoa.
And this is the first time I've seen you since.
Whoa, that is so cool. I can't believe that. But listen, I don't know what your name is. I'll call you Kay. Kay,
it's Kim.
Kim, that's great to hear. I'm really glad that I could do that for you. And life is pretty cool that way. People will have, I don't know, like an impact on your life, and then it'll just be from like small interactions with them or like watching their content for a couple of hours. It'll really kick it all off. So that's super cool. I'm really glad that I could do that for you.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that I'm 100% completely there, but I am definitely more on the deconstructed side than the deconstructing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well,
like I couldn't even answer what you said when you said it. So yeah.
Oh, sure. That's seriously really great to hear. Like I'm so glad. I'm really honored that I could be the one that does that for you. That's so cool. Hey, well, good luck on your journey.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, let's get a big W for Kim in that comment section. I think that's great. I'm glad that I can have an influence on the sorts of ideas that people are carrying around with them. That's super cool. Same thing when people tell me that I'm I'm the closest to convincing them of like moral realism being true. That's really cool that I'm able to do that. I think that moral realism is like an underlooked into position, which is why all these apologists are able to get away with so much, is because nobody's looked into it before. Or like the average person hasn't really looked into like objective ethics, which is why all these apologists are preying on the layman. But yeah, it's just like super cool. I currently have nobody requesting to join, so if you want to debate, if you think that God is real, if you'd like to defend that proposition, you want to argue in favor of God's existence, I have a couple of criteria. I ask that you have, that you be 18 or older, that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. I also ask that you have like some sort of reason to think that God exists. Other than that, I'm gonna end up going back to like Yap Central. Yesterday we did a little bit in like the members only live. We did, I think this is Banjo Guy too. Oh, it's like the ha Those mouth noises are pretty gross though, I won't lie. Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. I was hoping to throw a question your way while you're waiting for some.
Sure,
some
go for it.
Sure, go for it.
Oh wait, is there an echo?
Oh, I don't know. Is there an echo?
Testing. Nope. Okay, I think it's fine now. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was talking to a guy earlier, and I was trying to run the timeless argument, and they rebutted by saying that creation doesn't have to be temporal, that it's sequential. He mentioned something about like that it can be hierarchical instead. It didn't. It wasn't registering for me. I got lost in the sauce with all
Sure.
the whole thing.
So I think the critical question to be asking here is, was there a state of affairs where creation didn't exist? Typically, when somebody says that it's like that God didn't cause creation, but rather he like grounds creation, that commits you to like a number of things that they're probably not inclined to say. Presumably that commits them to the view that creation always existed. So it doesn't really seem like God created it if it always existed. In addition, in terms of like the, God grounds it view, I mean, that's not a particularly free act. If God is grounding it, there's nothing that he can do to bring it into existence. It was just automatically there, flows from his nature. He didn't choose to. So yeah, I don't know. I think that there's like some bullet bites for that position.
I was trying to run that kind of explanation by him, but he was saying that like, no, he is still prior to the universe in the same way that like one is prior to two. And I was trying to like be good faith with him and saying, well, yeah, like I get how things can be sequential and atemporal, like a number line, but we're talking here about events, which I don't see how you can get around, like how you can negate the idea that an event is inherently temporal.
Well, yeah,
don't need to be temporal.
That to me is like obvious that events are temporal, but I think the critical question you want to ask is like, is there a state where God exists alone? That is to say, like God exists and creation doesn't. And then, from this state, this is an unchanging state. This is a timeless, changeless state, and then it changes into a changing state. So there's just like a contradiction in that.
I felt that way as well. I think they were just kind of like obfuscating around the idea the whole time. But I appreciate your insight, though.
Yep. Hey, thanks so much for coming on up. I had a couple of people who requested to join, and then they like unrequested to join. If you want to debate, if you think that God is real, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. I also ask that you have some sort of reason to think that God exists. If you don't have that, then don't request to join. Otherwise, I might have to start reading off of the book again. Oh no, wouldn't that be scary? We talked a little bit yesterday in the members only live about the Zeno's paradoxes. We're reading through like a chapter. Let me pull up the good notes. I'll tell you all what's up. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Yep, doing well. How old are you?
I'm 24.
Yep, and what religion?
Well, I grew up Christian, and my family is Christian, and I don't know if you see me on here, but I'm on here like all the time because you're one of my favorite people to watch
Whoa, that's so
live.
cool.
Yeah. And I guess I'm kind of like in between. I would say that, and you could, skip me if you want, but I still feel like I feel like I'm definitely moving towards atheism, but I still feel some feelings for Christianity. And can I explain those reasons?
Sure, I guess.
It's like I would say it's more of like the history, the historic evidence of Christianity, more so than like Islam or Judaism and stuff like that.
Okay, so my understanding is that the historical evidence for Christianity is not very good. I guess like what sort of historical evidence for Christianity do you find compelling?
I would say a lot of the Roman sources and the Jewish sources that talk about the crucifixion, because we have people like hopefully I don't butcher this name, but I think it's Tacitus,
Yeah.
and a lot of other historians, Romans and Jewish, and some non-Christian ones that say that Jesus was crucified. And I'm trying to think if there was one historian.
Yeah, there's like Josephus and Tacitus are the big historical sources.
Yeah.
And I know one of them claims that Jesus was crucified, but so were a ton of people. The Romans persecuted a fuck ton of people. I don't have any reason to think like it's probably true that Jesus existed. I just don't know why we would think, based on the fact that he was crucified, that means that he resurrected, or that he is God, or that he's the Son of God, or that there's anything divine about him at all.
Yeah, that's pretty much why I'm moving more towards atheism, because many people were crucified, and even though every people, either theologians and historians, both Christian and non-Christian, pretty much universally agree that Jesus was crucified, but there's no really objective evidence that he is the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw this one mathematical problem, and you've probably heard this, and I don't think it's very rock solid evidence, but I was wondering if you've ever heard of it. But it was basically the idea that for Jesus to complete the 8 major messianic prophecies, it was like a 1 in 100 quadrillion chance, and it sounded really off, and I was wondering if you've ever heard something like that.
Well, first of all, that sounds like complete gibberish. I have no idea how you could possibly assign a probability to that. Or maybe it depends on like what the prophecies are. So what are the 8 messianic prophecies? Because my understanding is that if he's fulfilled any, that they're like very uninteresting.
I could try to look that up right now if you would like.
I mean, I'd be curious, right? Because my understanding is that, first of all, there's like 300 messianic prophecies, and second of all, that he's basically fulfilled none of them.
Yeah, let me, I'm firing up my computer because I saw that, and my first thought was, one of them being maybe that he could, how Jesus rode in on a donkey, and that's like, one of the prophecies. It's like, I feel like he could have like maybe known he needs to ride in on a donkey.
Well, also, so the ride in on a donkey prophecy specifically refers to the king of Israel. Jesus was not the king of Israel.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, that one seems like, a prophecy that wasn't fulfilled and can't be fulfilled. Or maybe they want to say like it'll be fulfilled in the future, but I mean, that sounds like giga cope.
Well, that's kind of how I feel with like the second coming, and it's like I feel like if he wanted to really give us objective evidence, he wouldn't just be like, like peace out, I'll come back whenever with the second coming and complete the rest of the messianic prophecies. So that's kind of where I'm like, that seems a little shaky. But
yeah, I mean, you'd think it seems like kind of unfair that in order to get into heaven, I need to find Jesus, I need to enter into this relationship with him. But then like the people who lived around the time of Jesus just had way more access to evidence of him being God than I do. All the people that lived around that area at that time, they have access to evidence that I don't have access to, assuming that Jesus like rose from the dead. Even people that lived like 200 years after the fact, like those people would have way more access to evidence that would be relevant than I do. It just seems like super unfair to people who are living like far off into the future, especially if he's all knowing and he knows that there's going to be like tons of religious confusion.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think this is a big part, and I wonder what you think about this. But I'm sure you love philosophy, so I'm sure you're familiar with Boethius.
I've heard the name, yeah. I know a little bit about him, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I don't expect you to know like every single one. He's just he's interesting to me because he was a Christian in during the Roman Empire, and I believe he was waiting trial to be executed because they considered him to be like working with another empire, even though there was no evidence. But this is towards the end of the Roman Empire, so like everyone was like on edge. Like they could like everyone was working against them. And
well, yeah, Boethius also lived in like the 500 ADs.
Oh,
this dude is like quite a distance from Jesus.
Yeah.
And even at this point, I thought that Christianity was like the official.
Yeah, it was. This is once the Roman Empire shifted from paganism to Christianity.
Yeah. Well, hey, I do have like some other guests, so if you want to come back in like a future date when you have your sources a bit better gathered, that'd be chill. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older, and make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, as we go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going?
Hello, you hear me?
Yep, how old are you?
I'm 18.
And what religion?
Christianity.
What makes you think God exists?
Well, I was kind of like an atheist for a long time, but then I learned about near-death experiences.
Okay.
And that's mainly why.
So, I think near-death experiences don't seem to provide very good evidence, because it seems like the near-death experience that you're having is extremely culturally dependent. For example, like Buddhists will have Buddhist near-death experiences where they'll see the Buddha, and Christians will have Christian near-death experiences where they'll see Christ, and then Muslims will have Muslim near-death experiences where they'll see Muhammad. It just doesn't seem like these are particularly good indicators of what actually comes after, because it seems like whatever ideas you already have in your head is going to be the sort of thing that you see. What that tells me is that your near-death experiences are probably a function of the brain, that they don't show you things that aren't already in your brain.
Okay. But I also heard like even atheists have had like visions. They've seen God or they've seen their loved ones.
Yep.
So why is that the case?
Well, I don't know. I'm not really sure what you're referring to when you say that they've like seen God. But in terms of like seeing your loved ones, yeah, that makes perfect sense. If near-death experiences are a function of your brain, you're going to see your loved ones because they're in your brain.
But I've even heard like, let me see. Like there's some atheists who claim to see Jesus Christ himself. I also read about Dr. Eben Alexander. Do you know that person?
Nope.
Well, he's this neuroscientist who went into coma for 7 days, and he claimed to see heaven and his loved ones and Jesus Christ.
The author, okay, he was under a medically induced coma while being treated for meningitis. His proof of heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife, describes his near-death experience while in the coma. He asserts that the coma resulted in brain death, that consciousness is not only a product of the brain and that can go on into the afterlife. Wow, he has like quite the prolific writing career. I mean, I guess like I'm not going to take this as very good evidence when he's like literally monetizing it.
I mean, okay. I mean, that's one way to look at it, I guess. But yeah, I've read like a lot of these cases, and they're all pretty similar. Even like blind people, there was a blind person who was blind from birth. Even she had a near-death experiences, and she was able to see her loved ones, people who've died. And like if it's like a hallucination, why don't they ever see someone who's alive?
I'm sure they do, like all the time.
No, they don't. Most of the cases I've read, they don't see people who are still currently alive.
Well, so one of the near-death experience claims that I hear very often is that people will be able to see like the operating room that they're getting operated on inside of. So, I mean, all the people they see there are currently alive. So it seems like a lot of near-death experiences do, in fact, involve that sort of thing.
Oh. Okay. Well,
So,
yeah,
do you think that like the brain is in like a yeah, I don't know. How would you explain the fact that near-death experiences are so like culturally varied?
Wait, what do you mean by culturally varied?
Yeah, like the near-death experience that you have is entirely dependent on like the culture. Or like how would you explain the fact that Buddhists typically get Buddhist near-death experiences and Muslims get Muslim near-death experiences, Christians get Christian near-death experiences? Like how would you explain something like that?
Honestly, yeah, I feel like that's the best argument against it. I honestly do not know, and that's just me being honest.
That's okay. I think that's totally fair. Do you have anything else?
Wait, so can I ask you what do you believe happens when we die?
I think it's probably just, going into non-existence. I think it's the same thing as before you were alive. I think that, we have like a conscious experience and that experience just comes to an end.
And like, can I ask, like, let's say you go into a near-death experience and you see like what you describe as Jesus Christ. What would you say about that if it does happen to you?
I think there's like a couple of ways that I could assess whether or not this is like the real Jesus Christ or whether it's like, my brain showing me the things that it thinks it should be showing me in a near-death experience. Which of course would just be like culturally relevant. So if I, in my near-death experience, could have a conversation with Jesus, the first thing that I would ask him is with like help resolving things like the problem of evil. How am I to make sense of the fact that, people are dying of cancer? And in fact, it looks like the human body is designed to produce all sorts of horrible mutations. And if he could give me like some sort of satisfying answer there that doesn't already exist in my brain, then I would find that to be pretty compelling.
Okay. So, yeah. Can I also, my other thing that, apart from near-death experiences, Jesus Christ, like rising from the dead, there's a lot of like evidence that people reported seeing him, after he risen.
Like what? What's the evidence?
Like people, like most historians, even atheist historians, they make mass hallucination theories, right? Let me try to pull up the name.
I don't even know what sort of evidence we would need the mass hallucination theory to explain. It doesn't seem like there's any good evidence that we have any testimony from the people who would have actually been involved. Oh yeah, David Friedrich Strauss was the one who made that claim. But yeah, if you want to search it up. So for me, like, I don't even get that far where I need to be positing a thing like this, because I don't even think that there's like good evidence to think that anybody actually saw him.
It was just, it was just word of mouth, I guess.
I mean, how are we arriving at the conclusion though?
That people reporting to see him?
Yeah, like who's making this report?
The 500 people of the Bible.
Like who? Name one.
Oh, I don't know their exact names.
They're never mentioned. Paul, or by name, they're never mentioned. Paul says 500 people saw him rise from the dead. He never gives any of the names of the 500. like, to me, that's as good as saying, like, yeah, I like breathed fire. You know, my 500 friends saw it. Don't ask for their names. Like, it's just not very compelling evidence.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yep. Do you have anything else?
Where do you think Jesus Christ's body was? Or, like, do you think it...
Could have been in
like
like a
what?
mass burial grave. Could have been in like some sort of, I don't know, like a traditional like Jewish burial grave. Could have been a lot of places.
Mm. Okay, even though, like, well, yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say here.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
thank you for the conversation.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on up. Appreciate it. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Let's read some supers. Jace, thank you so much for the 70 Canuck bucks. 70 Canuck bucks. That's incredible, Jace. Ian, thank you for all the good stuff you've done, especially for rekindling my interest in philosophy. I'm starting Michael Humer's Knowledge, Reality, and Value, and I may check out your book club at some point. Dinner or your next book is on me. Jace, that's incredible to hear. I'm so glad that I'm able to rekindle your interest in philosophy. It's seriously what I'm passionate about. I love philosophy. I like live and breathe philosophy. I'm like always curious about it. So I really appreciate that I'm able to share it with such wonderful people. I'm really glad that I can have an influence on your life, Jace. Thank you so much for that. Let's get a big W for Jace. I appreciate that. Andrew, thanks so much for the super chat. Let's get a big W for Andrew. I appreciate that. Andrew, your support has been incredible and indispensable in helping to support the channel. I'm thinking about upgrading my setup a little bit, so I really appreciate this. Thank you so much. Let's get a big W for Andrew. Seriously, couldn't do it without you. I activated the thing too late, but Jace, thanks so much for the cool Corey membership, and Dr. Fudge, thanks so much for the $10 super chat. This is for Banjo Guy, not you, Ian. I only watch in the hopes of hearing the rare call of the banjo. True. You have to, born to listen to Banjo Guy, forced to listen to Ian. What a fucking nightmare. Manny Black, thanks so much for the 1 month cool Corey membership. You're awesome. Oh, no, I've blundered. At least you recognize that. Excuse me. All right, let's go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, how old are you?
22.
Yep. What religion?
Christian.
What makes you think God exists?
Honestly, it's like a fine-tuning argument. I don't know if you're up for that, just to hear it.
Yeah,
I'll just
I'm
say
like
that-
vaguely familiar.
Yeah, it's just at least, I wouldn't say every metric is finely tuned, but for example, the cosmological constant and the electromagnetic force field that, balances atoms in space and all that stuff. At least from the cosmological constant point, sorry, my English is a little bad.
It's okay.
For at least from that point, the chances of it even coming to fruition is what 1/1 times 10 to the 120th power. That's 120th zeros after.
Sure. So what's your understanding of what would be different if these constants were different?
Yeah, at least the cosmological one, if it was slightly, very, very, very slightly, like decimal points of like really exact. If it was slower, galaxies would collapse. If it was faster, they would not form at all.
Yeah, sure. So in this world, though, there would still be particles. There would still be, I don't know, like electrons,
Yeah,
for
correct.
example.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
if what God wants this universe for is life, presumably, then it seems like he could have had that even with these different constants. Let's say the constants are different and it's just a bunch of electrons. Well, at that point, God could make all of these electrons morally valuable. He could give them all minds and allow them to interact with each other, share certain like deep conscious experiences with each other. God could have his morally relevant agents in any set of constants, which means that there's no reason to think that the constants needed to be this way as opposed to that way under theism. So I guess like what did God want from this form that he couldn't have gotten from like electrons with emotional states?
Well, it says in the Bible a lot that he wanted us to be like his main creation. I don't think he will give any conscious identity to stuff like matter. That's probably what I would go to.
Why not?
Because like he talks in the Bible, he wanted us to be his creation. Everything around us is built for us.
But why did he want that?
I don't know. I guess I can't answer that question. I understand your reasoning. It's like, why would he chose to do that?
Yeah, like why is he choosing humans over electrons in love?
I don't know, maybe because he is, like he says, in his image. But
sure, then that leads to a big problem, which is that at that point his image is finely tuned. So there's like some set of constants that will allow for life in the sense that you're thinking of, some set of constants, and then there's like a much narrower range of constants that will allow for humans specifically. So in order to deal with the fine tuning of, you know, these constants, you've now added in like even more precise fine tuning into your model of God. God is more finely tuned than the constants themselves are, which kind of indicates that your hypothesis doesn't solve fine tuning. In fact, it kind of makes it worse.
You're saying because it's too broad, like at least the ones that I'm picking don't have anything to do with like humans specifically per se?
No, if God's image is that of a human, then God's image is finely tuned.
But how so? My argument didn't come from like human, imagery.
I thought your explanation for why God chose to create humans was because those were his image.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say the image is finely tuned. Or you mean like it's finely tuned just because it's perfect in his image?
No, because there's only certain physical constants that will allow for humans to exist.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's like a smaller number of constants than, the constants that will allow life to exist. So in order to explain why the constants are life permitting, we've posited a God whose image is even more narrowly tuned than the constants themselves.
Oh, okay. I see. So for you, for example, to even accept that outlook, it will have to be like the same amount of constants for life permitting and human permitting, correct?
Well, I mean, if that's what you did, if they were like the same, human permitting and life permitting, if those were exactly the same set of constants, then at that point you wouldn't have solved fine tuning either, because you've just like kind of embedded into your hypothesis that God's going to create exactly humans.
Oh, okay. Well, I see what you're saying then.
So I guess like just to put like a bow on it, like you're attempting to explain the fine tuning of the universe by like finely tuning a God with desires to create exactly this universe or something like
I mean
approximately like it. So It doesn't seem like that really explains the fine tuning. It just kind of kicks the can down the road.
Okay, then yeah. I mean, I haven't really thought about it that way, but again, that was really my only argument. I just wanted to see what you had to say about that.
Yep.
But I appreciate it. Yep.
Hey, well, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Of course. Have a nice day.
Yep, you too. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all the good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you are 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. What the heck did I do? I lost it. I dropped it. Where'd my chat go? What the flip? What the dickens? Chat? Oh, okay, it's right here. Okay. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, doing all that good stuff as we go to the very next guest.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 24.
Yep. What religion?
Okay. Yeah, so I will not waste much of your time because I know this is not your content, but I'm not religious anymore. 1.5 years ago, I was here to prove you that Christianity is true, but after 1.5 years of much research, my conclusion is that we just don't know. So I was just going to ask you, what do you think? Like, are you also in the conclusion that we just don't know? It might be Muhammad or a holographic universe. Like, there must be something, but we just don't know. Like, what do you think?
When you say there must be something, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is not necessarily a God, but what I mean is that there must be some kind of explanation for all of this experience, right? But whether that is God or we are in a video game, for example, we just don't know, right? So
I don't know why it would be any of those. I mean, presumably, like, the easy explanation is that laws of physics exist, that they come from some more like fundamental physical object, something like, for example, like the wave function, some sort of like universal wave function from quantum mechanics. I think like the explanation that I'd be reaching for the least would probably be the explanation that, we live in like a video game. I also think that we can know like quite a few things, and I think that we can evaluate the evidence to come to the conclusion that it's not like specific things. Like, for example, surely it's not like some God who's all good. Otherwise, all the cancer in the world doesn't really make much sense.
Agree. So I totally agree with that. I came to the same conclusion. So, like, is your conclusion a little bit saying like we just don't know? It might be random, might be something, but we just can't explain it.
It's not really clear to me what you're asking me to explain, like the specific thing.
Well, my question is more like, what do you think about this world, or are you accepting like we just don't know?
There are some things we know and some things we don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Because
you're probably going to need to be a bit more specific.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not really a good explanation, but after my whole research about many things, I just came to the conclusion that we just don't know, so I also don't really care anymore, and I just accepted that we just don't know, and whatever this is, whether it's accident or by whatever God or alien, we just don't know. So I was just curious, what was your perspective with your wisdom of this?
I guess I think your question is underspecified, but hey, I appreciate you coming on up here. But I'm probably gonna move to it like a believer. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Yep. How old are you?
I'm 27.
Yep. And what religion?
I am an Orthodox Christian.
Okay. What makes you think God exists?
Yeah, so I'd say it gives a good explanation, pretty much for the three categories of philosophy, right? Metaphysics, ethics, epistemology.
Sure. Okay. I guess like there's quite a few things that I find to be like incoherent about like the Christian metaphysics. Maybe you could help me with. Specifically, like Eastern Orthodox metaphysics is committed to the doctrine of divine simplicity, and it seems to just be like a gibberish doctrine. I'd love some help with sorting that out.
Before we get there, we have to talk about knowledge first, right?
Oh, okay. I thought you said that it was a good explanation for the three categories.
Yeah, but in order to get to those other categories, you have to go through epistemology first.
What's the argument for that?
Yeah, so we have to have some concept of knowledge and how we get knowledge. And I'm wondering, how is yours anything outside of just being infinitely regressive?
For example, like you could have certain like foundational beliefs such that the rejection of them is self-defeating.
So axioms?
Depends what you mean by axiom. If by axiom you mean like...
that's what it is,
well,
right?
let's
That's
just calm down there. There's no need to be getting like excited or whatever. So if by an axiom what you mean is like something that's... Whoa, let's just calm down there. No need to be getting upset.
So you're
I'm sorry that this debate already has gone like quite bad for you, and that's that's not what I said. I don't think I said that. So, and I'm not sure. Maybe there's like a conversation playing in the background. I'm not really sure. I don't think any of those words came out of my mouth. If God designed your senses, then why are you not able to like listen?
Why can't you let me talk?
Whoa, sorry. Just answer my question. Calm down.
Just droning.
Whoa, just take a deep breath and answer the question. I'm sorry that the question like flambés you. Do you want to answer the question or do you want to dodge? It sounds like what you'd rather do is dodge. Yeah, if God designed your ears to listen, then why are they incapable of doing so?
Yeah, see, that's not even that. That's just some rhetoric. Now,
it's not rhetoric. Answer the question. Right? Why did God design your ears so badly?
Well, I can listen.
That's you misheard like question. Twice. You attributed to me all these words about, whoa, calm down there. There was really no reason to be getting this upset.
Dude, are
Seriously,
you
take like a
autistic
deep
or
breath.
something, bro? Like,
Yeah, a little
slow
bit,
down
and
for a
it's
second.
only gonna get worse for you, right?
See,
Because
guys,
I'm gonna
he knew
drag
that I was
you.
coming
I'm
with
gonna
some
drag
heat,
you
so
into
he's
my
getting, like,
autisto
so he's
box,
prattling
and then
now.
we're gonna like wail on
He
you.
knew I was coming
So
with
let's
some
just
heat, so now
calm down
he's-
there. There's seriously no reason to be getting this upset. You sound like super triggered. Just answer the
So you
question.
have to have
If
axioms,
God
correct?
designed your ears, then why are they incapable of hearing? Why did you mishear twice if God designed your ears?
Well,
Wouldn't
let's
we expect
clarify
God to
then.
give you
Maybe I
senses that were
misheard.
like
Why are
truth
you doing this?
tracking?
Okay, maybe I misheard.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so
yeah.
let's clear
So
what you
wait,
set
but
up.
why would God give you ears that mishear sometimes?
Bro, why are you saying
Just answer
that?
the question.
Of course
You
we
said
wouldn't-
that God accounts for knowledge, the fact that we have knowledge, but that doesn't make a lot of sense if our ears are
well, hold
constantly
on a second,
mishearing
bro.
things.
You
Whoa,
wouldn't- we
calm
can't get
down. You
into it
sound
'cause you keep
super
prattling. Let
upset.
me ask my question.
Seriously, just take a deep breath and answer
You
my
have to have
question. My
axioms,
question came
correct?
before your question. Answer my
you s-
question.
Bro,
Why would
you
God
have to
design
have
your ears in
axioms,
such a way
correct?
that they mishear? Why would that be the case?
Because humans are imperfect. Do you not know that?
Well, sure. Then how do you know that you have knowledge and that you aren't
This
just
is like
mishearing
saying,
everything?
why would someone have heart failure? It's because of the fall, bro. We have
Sure.
explanations
What's
for
the evidence
this
for
in our
that?
theology. What?
What's the evidence for that?
So you're asking me for evidence?
Yeah, you said that
wait,
the
hold on a
reason
second,
why
hold
our
on a
ears
second. You're
mishear
asking me
is
for
because of the
empirical
fall of
evidence an
man.
immaterial
I didn't say
happening?
empirical evidence.
Well, what do you mean by evidence?
Your
then?
ears misheard once more.
What do you mean by
Evidence
evidence?
is just some fact that raises the
Dude, why do
probability
you
of
keep
some
prattling like this?
hypothesis.
Let's fucking
Whoa,
get into the argument.
calm
Stop
down. There's
insulting my
seriously
hearing, you
no
fucking piece of
reason to be
shit.
getting this
Stop.
upset. Unfortunately, whether your ears are capable of hearing or not
he
is
knows-
directly
guys, listen, he
relevant to
knows
this
I was coming with some
conversation.
heat,
And he
so
got
now
blown
he's
the
doing
fuck
this
out
shit.
so viciously
Nope,
on the
he knows I
substance that
was
all
coming
he
with
can
some
do
heat,
is
so now
pivot
he's
to
doing this.
rhetoric.
You're scared,
All
dude.
he
You're
can do
scared.
is meta. You're scared.
You're
You're scared.
bro.
He says running to meta.
Well, yeah, you
He can't
assume a
actually
lot of
engage in the
metaphysical
substance. He
things,
got blown
bro,
out on
before
the
you even open your
substance.
mouth.
We
You
put him in the
understand that?
shredder on the substance. Now all he has is
What,
these
are
weak
metaphysics real? Are
pivots to
metaphysics
meta.
real?
Whoa, calm down. Why would I let you
Are
pivot? I'm
metaphysics
not letting
real?
you pivot. I'm not going to let you pivot.
Wait,
Just
no,
answer
you're
my
pivoting,
question.
bro, by talking about my hearing when I
No,
was trying
because
to
you
give our
misheard me twice.
epistemology.
3 times at this point. You
I'm
know,
giving you
first
our
you
epistemology, you won't
misheard
listen. You
like
fucking
the
coward, dude.
comments
Shut
about
up, dude.
oh shit, he's so
Why do you
fucking
keep
mad.
doing this, bro?
He's so mad, dude. Calm down.
Just like, dude, just shut the fuck
Seriously,
up and let me
take
speak,
like a deep
dude.
breath.
This is not how
It's really
dialogue
gonna
works.
be okay. Yeah, I'm not
You're
gonna take
scared,
dialogue
dude.
advice
He's
from you,
scared.
big
He doesn't
dog.
actually wanna
You're
have
like
a
a
conversation.
preceptor. Why would I ever take dialogue advice from you? And then he ran the fuck away. Holy shit. What a brutal bloodbath. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Damn, I'm glad that he crashed the fuck out. I was like reaching in my head and my memory. I was like, what were his mishearings? And I couldn't come up with anything in the moment. So I'm glad that he crashed the fuck out and ran away. You know, if he was a bit more humble, that might have been an embarrassing moment for me. But luckily, it's always cool when your opponent makes a mistake. That is an incorrect number. 10 to the negative 120 is the value of the cosmological constant, not the probability of it happening. That's true. I didn't even catch that. No, Darth Dawkins has me blocked. Darth Blockins, if you will. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. I also ask that you have some sort of argument or evidence for God's existence, and with that, we'll go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going? Ethan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my first time doing this, but I've been seeing what your sort of message is about, but I haven't really gotten from tip to tail, what is your opinion about God not being real? I'm just confused about what you really...
Would you mind clarifying the question a little bit?
So your claim is God isn't real.
Yes.
And I'm asking, why do you believe that?
So I think that God couldn't possibly be real because I don't think that God could possibly be the creator of time, since time must have always existed, since change must have always existed, because, if change didn't exist, then there would be this changeless state that changes into a changing state. So that means we can't have that. So change must have always existed. There must have never been a changeless state that changed into a changing state. But if change exists, then time exists. So time must have always existed. And because time is part of the fundamental substance of the universe, space-time, because space is inseparable from time, that means that the universe itself must have always existed. So it just doesn't seem like a God could exist insofar as the universe can't be created.
That's an interesting point. I never really thought of it like that. I've heard an argument on the other side of things where this sort of like Trinity had to come together in order for matter to exist, because if space didn't exist, then you couldn't put matter somewhere. And if time didn't exist, then you couldn't put it in a point in time. So that's kind of like maybe.
I think the easy way to avoid that is to just say that all three always existed.
Yeah, I guess we could say that. I guess my argument doesn't really go back to like when something exists, but as you can probably guess, I think that God is real. But I think that you can look around now and sort of infer it just because there's these universal things that are being held constant.
Like what?
So like, well, I think that our fundamental sort of presupposition, especially in physics, is that there's universal invariance, meaning that things are constant everywhere, meaning that the rules everywhere are the same here as everywhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a big asterisk there, which is that, you know, there are times where the laws of physics differ. Like, for example, the laws of physics differ if you're, I don't know, like observing things from an accelerating reference frame, as opposed to like one that's, you know, constant velocity. So yeah, like that's like kind of true, but.
Well, no, but the only way that you can say that is because there's a fundamental truth underpinning that.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah.
So like that fundamental underlying truth is invariant. So like if you're in an accelerating reference frame, that behavior is like characterized a certain way based on that fundamental truth.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And what I'd say is that if you look at it in terms of like cause and effect, I'd argue that universal invariant rules imply a universal invariant rule keeper.
Why?
So I just wonder what you think about that.
So I'm inclined to believe that.
Well, because you have to have something causing it. So it's.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay. I don't mean to overtalk you. There's a bit of a delay, but no, go for it.
So the reason why you need that is because of cause and effect. Like, and I think it's very interesting that you can kind of demonstrate where I'm going with this in terms of like maybe like a simulation theory or like with computers in specific. Like if you have a video game character or some rules that you set in a digital landscape, something's keeping track of that. And that's only there because something is keeping track of that. Or maybe more like viscerally, you could say that like I can only experience the things in my body because my brain, something in my brain is keeping track of all that. So I think that it just follows from cause and effect that.
I think a good response that one might want to give to this is that the laws of physics aren't like things behave the way they do, not because they're, you know, going to the laws of physics and checking how they should behave, but rather that there's like specific behaviors that arise. The way that things behave can be summarized throughout all of physics as things follow the path of least resistance. You know, when we experience gravity, it's because all these massive objects are distorting space-time, and we just our bodies travel across the path of least resistance, which is straight downwards. You know, that is the shortest path between us and the Earth in this case. So there's like a good mathematical explanation for this, which is that my understanding is that if you evaluate this from like a quantum perspective, that all of the other possible paths kind of cancel each other out with like interference patterns. Sorry, that was that's probably not going to be very well explained, but point is that there's like simple explanations for all these laws of physics.
Yeah, I think that you could say that there are explanations for it, like emergent behavior, like I don't know, the tide is only a thing because of how all these like water molecules interact, or like how the moon interacts with the oceans or whatever. So like those emergent behaviors, no doubt. But my point is that the underlying like principles have to be kept track of, or else that just doesn't rationally make sense. It's like saying that there's no cause to that effect.
So I'll reiterate, like the thing that the underlying principle that unites all of physics is that things travel across the path of least resistance. It's called the principle of least action. So all that it takes to account for the laws of physics is to account for why they do that. And my understanding is that there's good physics explanations about how any of the other paths, they all kind of cancel each other out, and you're left with just the path of least resistance, you know, the action that takes like the least energy.
Yeah, but like what, with respect to what? Like something has to be keeping track of what is the least if you can, like that doesn't mean anything if it doesn't have like a point of reference.
No, like all of so specifically, let's take like the gravity example. It's the shortest path. That there are paths in space-time between your molecules and you know, everything else. And the shortest path is between you and the Earth. So whenever you jump up,
Yeah, but what's
the shortest
keeping track
path is
of all
between
that is
you
my
and the
point.
Earth. It's just because that is the shortest path, and you travel along the shortest path.
As defined by what though?
Length.
And like that's, yeah, but like what's holding that? Like what is keeping track of that length is kind of my point. Like
The
this
fact
kinda
that all
goes
the
down to,
other
like,
paths cancel
information.
each other out.
Yeah, but like what's holding that information is sort of my point.
All the other paths cancel each other out, is my understanding of it. It's like, yeah, sorry, somebody put in the comments. It's the geometry of space-time, yeah.
So like, okay, let's say we wanted to do like an actual calculation of what that geometry looked like, the geometry of space.
Yeah.
If you were to put it into a computer and to like minimize these paths, you'd have to represent that and store that in some kind of variable, or something would have to basically be keeping track of that data. And that's my point, is that if you can measure that information, that kind of implies that something is keeping track of that information. If I can run this calculation in my computer, then that's implying that my computer is keeping track of all the data relevant to that question.
Not
And my
quite,
point is
because
that
it's destructive. Like the process of the other paths interacting with each other is like a mutual like negation of both of them. So you're only left with like this one path.
Okay, I think we might be talking past each other right now, but so like you have this mutual negation from all the other paths that could possibly be.
Yep.
But like, again, like what is defining those paths? And I know, like you said, length, but like even deeper than that, like what is keeping track of that length? What is keeping these things invariant is sort of my
Like the substance of
leading
space-time.
yeah, like what is that substance? Is
It's like a fundamental entity for the universe. It's probably where it's gonna like bottom out. You know, maybe we'd want to say that it's grounded in something further, like, you know, the wave function from quantum mechanics. But there's gonna be like some fundamental physical object in my view.
would you think that anything's like keeping track of that, quote unquote?
Not really. And not in the sense that you mean it, at least.
So I guess my next question would be, how is that non-causal, or how is that causal rather?
How's what
So that's-
causal? It's a grounding relation.
So you don't think anything causes that to be? It just kind of is. There's
No. It's grounded in something,
underlying.
but it's not caused.
What's the difference?
So grounding specifically refers to like metaphysical explanation, whereas like causal explanation is like it's more about like a production at specific times. Whereas like just in virtue of the nature of two, like 2 as a number grounds the fact that there is an even prime number. It's not like the number 2 causes there to be an even prime number, but rather it's like a different sort of relationship there. So you'd probably want to say that space-time grounds the principle of least action, that it operates in accordance with this just based on the geometry of space-time.
But do you think anything causes that space-time, or that it just, I guess you kind of said that initially, is that it's just this eternal thing that's always been around?
Yeah, exactly. The question of whether or not it's like grounded in something, that's like an interesting question. And I suppose like whether or not it's caused is too, but you know, my answer to whether or not it's caused is a firm no, but it might be grounded in something.
And is your conclusion drawn from just our understanding of physics, or is there something you said metaphysics? I'm kind of confused what you meant by that. Or
So metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies like the fundamental nature of physical reality, or just reality in general, I suppose. So
could you demonstrate what you're talking about outside of this context? Like, could you have you mentioned 2 not causing prime numbers, but it's like a grounding fact.
Yep.
Could you give another example? Maybe I'm just confused.
Sure.
Really...
Like electricity is grounded in electrons. Electrons don't like cause electricity to exist, but electricity just is electrons behaving in a certain way. So it's not like a causal relationship, although in some sense...
Well, that is a causal relationship, though. Like, currents and voltages are defined by... Yeah, it is.
Those just are electrons behaving in a specific way. They're not causing themselves to exist.
Well, that would get to like my fundamental sort of proposition that there's something below those electrons causing them to be there. And I don't know, like the point that's so compelling to me is that like you can demonstrate this with, I don't know, people love talking about like the matrix or like simulation theory and all that stuff. But like fundamentally something has to be keeping track of, say, this live right now. Like there's some server keeping track of your voice and my voice and your video, and or there's something keeping track of like my heartbeat in my body so that my body can do whatever with that. So I just think it's very compelling to me that you can demonstrate that when you keep track of these system variables, that's how things are made, and that's where these emergent properties come from.
Well, but so why would I want to inflate my ontology?
We don't know what electrons...
If I can keep track of all this stuff, if I can account for all this stuff without having to like massively inflate my ontology by adding like, you know, like a whole like scorekeeping apparatus, like if the substance of reality, like space-time itself, is capable just by its very nature of making sure that all of this stuff happens in accordance with the laws of physics, then I'm not sure why I would be adding like additional things to the worldview.
Could you like go over exactly what that ontology is?
Yeah,
I might have missed that.
Yeah, so space-time functions, you know, space-time has geometry. It has like non-Euclidean geometry. So from the math of space-time itself, we're able to account for things like the principle of least action, that everything across all the different fields follows the path of least resistance. This is capable of being accounted for because within the math of that geometry itself, all of the paths other than the path of least resistance are canceled out, just within like the geometry itself.
So, okay, so is the path of least resistance across all space-time is sort of your fundamental idea. So like, where does that... Again, I'm just kind of confused. Like, how does that sort of box out the idea of God? Or like, how does that account for, like, do you think there's something outside of space-time? Or do you think that's all there is?
It's like possible that it's further grounded. You know, maybe it's grounded in like a wave function from quantum mechanics. There's like one universal wave function and space and time are emergent from that. That's possible. But no, I don't think that this is caused by like something supernatural. And in fact, if time has always existed, like the argument I gave earlier suggests, then you know, there just kind of is no room for a God. The universe can't be created.
So when you look at stuff like the Big Bang and all that, you think it might just be some like giant loop where like it bangs
Possibly.
and then crunches?
Yeah.
And then... So do you believe in the Big Bang? Do you think that's a real theory? Or...
Yep.
Okay.
There's tons of evidence for the Big Bang.
Yeah.
The question is whether or not it's the beginning, which we just have no reason to think. And in fact, we have like good evidence to think that the universe is going to end in a big crunch.
Yeah, I mean, if we get a better understanding of dark matter and dark energy, we could maybe say that more for certain. But
Sure. But I mean, what we have now gives us like good preliminary evidence that seems to allow us to make those claims.
sure. I mean, who can say, right? It'll be a long time in the future, supposedly. But again, I guess I don't know. It maybe is just a question to be left with you. I don't know if we can really get any further if this like causal point that I'm trying to make doesn't really hit.
Well, I just
But,
feel like I've
no.
answered it. So if
I
you
think that we're just like talking past each other
possibly,
personally.
well, hey, do you have anything else?
Yeah. Do you have any like quarrels or qualms with like specific religions or
Yeah, I could give you.
like what is your opinion about religion as a whole? I guess.
I mean, if you'd like, and I don't know why you would want this, but if you'd like, we could go through the Bible and you could explain like all the horrible atrocities.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Let's start with the Amalekite slaughter. I think that this is probably like the most compelling piece of evidence to me for why Christianity is false. In 1 Samuel 15, 2-3, God commands the slaughter of the Amalekite people. He says, "Go kill the men, the women, the children, the infants. Do not spare them. Put them all to death." And then the rest of the chapter is the Israelites going and killing the men, the women, the children, and the infants. So they must have committed some horrendous crime. And, you know, in some sense they did, but it wasn't these Amalekites that committed the crime. It was Amalekites 400 years earlier. The people receiving the death penalty, according to the text, didn't do anything to deserve it. Or, well, that's kind of the thing in contention. They didn't do anything wrong that led to them receiving the death penalty. Rather, the group that did something wrong was their great grandparents, and now they're getting punished for the crimes of their elders. So, my line of questioning here is pretty simple. Do you think that the Amalekite infants deserved the death penalty when God gave it to them?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. I think you should ask the Amalekites that too, considering that they sort of engaged in child sacrifice along with the Canaanites too.
So a couple things to say about that. I mean,
They worshiped
first, you
Moloch,
know, it's
didn't
like first, it's like not super clear then why they would be getting punished for that. You know, maybe God just wanted, maybe God wanted the Israelites to do a bit of kill stealing. You know, he wanted the kill on those Amalekite infants for himself. But also, there's just no evidence that the Amalekites were engaging in child sacrifice from the Bible. It mentions that the Canaanites were doing that, but there's no mention that the
historically there is.
Amalekites. There's no historical record of the Amalekites even existing, so that can't be true.
Well, I guess we just agree to disagree. But I mean, again, this is a salient theme throughout the Old Testament that a lot of these tribes that were wiped out pretty openly engaged in like child sacrifice. And like as far as I can tell, I mean, again, this is just a salient theme of the Old Testament and the New Testament that you reap what you sow. So if you're doing that and like that's your culture, it kind of follows that God would want that wiped out.
That just doesn't really make sense, right? You reap what you sow is a good lesson. I'm on board with you reap what you sow, given that it's like a just reaping. But I don't think the Amalekite infants sowed anything.
Well, again, like you gotta not take this 21st century purview where like you grow up and like you could become like an adult. It's like something that happens when you're like 20 and whatnot. But like I think especially like with the Epstein files, maybe you can definitely see how heinous people can indoctrinate their youth to doing very heinous things as well. So like just to kind of presume like that's what the infants were like. They were like me or you who had this very nice upbringing, so to speak, especially compared to their like 4,000 years ago. Like just in general, things were pretty rough back then. But the idea of the Bible is that God is just and that he was just to do so. And like, again, maybe the bigger question is like, killing people is bad, obviously, from our perspective. But like, does God have the right to kill people considering he gave them life? Like, if you're
So-
actually honestly entertaining that question.
So, okay, the question that I'd probably want to get an answer to is, did the infants deserve it?
Presumably, yeah.
Okay, so you think sometimes infants deserve the death penalty?
I think that God has the right to do what God wants to do.
So you would
And
say
in the
that
context of-
sometimes infants deserve the death penalty?
In the context of the Old Testament, yeah.
Okay, that's like deeply unintuitive.
I guess we can just disagree. But
Okay,
again, that's
I
like
mean,
saying
like,
God
you
who
don't have
gave
that
life to
intuition,
everything
do
doesn't
you?
have the right to take life.
You
know?
seem like a chill dude, so I can't imagine that you intuit that sometimes infants deserve the death penalty.
Not now, of course not. I don't want anyone to die. But again, like 4,000 years ago, in the context of like child sacrificing cultures, it's like I can't even begin to imagine what that looks like. I don't even know. Like again, back to the Epstein stuff. I don't even know what our politicians are doing. So like, but there's clearly like a very real, like evil, in my opinion, demonic thing going on. So like when I look at that and I'm just like, it's just whatever. Like no, that doesn't seem smart to me. And
Well,
I
I
think
guess
that when you
I'm.
read a text and it says don't spare any of them, it's like that sounds like awful and heinous, and it probably would be very horrifying to watch, obviously. But like when you're looking back on a culture that like openly, again, we can disagree on this, but I think that they like actually worship demons. Like what is that going to pan out to? Sort of
Okay.
question.
I mean, do you think that we should be like taking to the streets and like people who try to worship demons today? Like, I mean, like if Jeffrey Epstein had
No, you should try to
children,
convince
would they somehow deserve to get slaughtered? I would think that if somebody slaughtered Jeffrey
No.
Epstein's like innocent babies, that would be like a horrible injustice.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. But again, like the Bible is a giant historical narrative. So like the entire Old Testament builds up to the New Testament and like Jesus Christ fulfilling these things. And like, again, I'm a Christian, as you can probably guess, but the idea is that like if, I don't know, Jeffrey Epstein's kids were in front of us, we'd say like, hey man, stop engaging in this like child sacrifice stuff. It's pretty evil.
Oh,
Like you try to convince them of their wrongs.
well,
not murder them,
yeah.
You know?
I mean, if they had like learned from him and they were like doing what he had done, then sure, right? Like it's a different scenario. But if they're like newborns, like some of the Amalekite infants, God outlines infants as one of the groups that should be killed. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. He's saying you should go kill these infants. It just doesn't seem like they could possibly, like at that point, you're committed to like a pretty wild theory of justice where actually you can be punished even though you yourself are innocent and have done nothing wrong.
Well, I think that there's a lot to that story. Specifically when it comes to, again, my claim is that they're worshiping demons. So like you kind of got to like walk through that line of thinking, and that line of thinking sort of leads to them.
Why would that make the infants deserving? Let's say the adults are worshiping demons. Why would the infants then deserve to die?
Well, I was about to get there. It kind of comes to this idea of possession, and like you can quote unquote sacrifice a child, and I guess this is pretty grotesque, but in like different ways. So like literally killing them, or versus like offering their body as a way of like inhabitation. Like again, this is very like woo random stuff, and it's not really covered in the Bible, but like that, as far as I can tell, is a very real sort of sentiment. So
you're saying the infants deserve to get slaughtered because actually they'd been like embedded with demons?
That they had been offered up to them, yeah.
Okay, like even
By
like
the
the newborns
Amalekites.
that just popped out?
Supposedly, yeah. I mean, again, if we're talking about demon worship and like again, supernatural things, like why is that outside the realm of possibility?
There's
I guess, from
literally
your
no
position.
indication of anything even approximating that
If you're honestly
in the
entertaining the
Bible
idea
with
that God
respect
is
to the
real.
Amalekites. But you know, I don't even think that
Well,
there's
there are in other
any
tribes,
sort
though.
of I guess like
There
for
are in
other
other
groups,
tribes.
can I get like the verse that said that like for this other tribe, you know, as soon as the babies were born, they were inhabited by demons or something?
Well, again, that's found more historically than specifically in the Bible. And
Like
I guess if you
where?
wanted a more specific example, I can't remember the, huh?
Oh, I was just asking like where. I was asking for a more specific example.
Of like the historical or the biblical,
Yeah,
yeah,
just like some historical
of
group
like demon possession.
that were offering their, you know, they were trying to get
Well,
their babies possessed by demons like straight after birth.
well, I think that you could look at something even more recently, again, with like, this is a long narrative, but like the Epstein stuff like really does detail that, where they try to not only, you know, hurt kids in specific ways, but also indoctrinate their like next generation, so to speak.
I don't think that there's
Into,
anything in the Epstein files about getting like newborns to be possessed by demons.
Well, ritualistic satanic abuse or satanic ritualistic abuse, something like that. There's like a very real like psychological pathology that can be described by people who were born into cults, born into sort of these circles, and the impact on their psychology. And again, like from a modern lens, this is like a psychological view, but again, in ancient times, you might see it as like a certain kind of possession.
Well, wait, so are
That's
you
my
saying that
argument.
there's like stuff about this in the Epstein files? That in the Epstein files, there's like details about, you know, children being possessed by demons right after they're born?
Not just in the Epstein files, but I think that the Epstein files does show that there is like a very real sentiment of like demon worship in our society. Like
So-
that's a real thing, whether you agree with God being real or not.
I mean, like that's like a side
So-
point. I've looked into that stuff, and it all turns out to not be the case. So, I mean, like we could either tangent there, where we can argue about whether or not there's anything in the Epstein files about like demonic worship. I mean, alternatively,
Well, I was just gonna like kind of patch up what I said about the Old Testament stuff, since you asked about it.
it just doesn't seem like we have
But-
like a concrete example of the thing that you're describing.
Well, you do have the example. I think it was in Kings when Saul was the king, but they didn't even want like the ruler of. So Saul was trying to boast after he defeated. I forget who it was who he defeated, but he didn't want him to. Fuck, what's his name? The prophet at the time who was instructing Saul on what to do to lead Israel, told him not to keep like prisoners from this like group
This
of
is the
people.
Amalekites, by the way.
that
You're thinking of the Amalekites,
This is
the
the
story that we're
Amalekites?
talking
That's-
about. Yeah, yeah. They
Was
they
this
go and they
fought- Was
slaughter.
this fought under Saul,
Yes. Yep.
King Saul?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So what happens in the rest of the chapter is that they go, they slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants, and then they leave like the king alive and some of the best livestock alive. And then God is pissed that they left anything living. So he's like,
Mhm.
okay, you know, new king time.
Well, again, that sort of just that illustrates like what's going on there. It's like almost like a disease. Like it was like quite literally possessing this group of people. So,
I just don't think that there's like
And I mean,
anything
like,
in the
you could-
text about like demons
well, I
that
mean, you can even
Saul
see
is
this
like
in like the
demon
New Testament and the
possessed.
story of. That Saul's demon possessed, or
Yeah,
the
there's
king is.
like you have to be doing like some
king
like
that they left
serious
alive.
like reading into these verses.
Well, I mean, I think that it's explained in other places, like Legion, the story of Legion in the New Testament. The guy who was possessed by like a dozen demons or whatnot. Like, that's a pretty good example of that kind of possession taking place, and you know, him doing evil stuff. He would cut himself against the rocks until Jesus expelled all those demons. So, like,
Sure.
that kind of possession was very real, is kind of my whole point, and is very real. And I think that again, if you're looking at this group of people who worship demons and they sacrifice their kids to
Wait,
demons,
sorry.
like
Well, okay.
it's-
I think at this point I'm probably just going to ask you, what's the evidence that they sacrifice their kids to demons or worship demons?
the Amalekites.
Yeah.
I just remember reading about this in other texts in a historical angle. I can look it up right now though.
Please, I'd be like super curious because my understanding is that there's like none of this. I guess who did the oof. It doesn't look like there's any specific mentions about what deities the Amalekites worship, and I know for certain that there's no mention of the Amalekites sacrificing children.
I might be thinking of the Canaanites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just seems like there's something like seriously missing, and if not seriously missing, seriously wrong with the story of the Amalekites.
I guess you could, from my angle, I'd say that the Amalekites were also, persecuting the Israelites, and maybe they were also doing this demon worship that you could see in the Canaanite people as well. I haven't fully read through the story of it yet, but yeah.
There's just like no evidence for that.
Well, what evidence is there in the Bible that he did it unjustly, I guess? Like, did they
I don't think
or did he just say that God demanded them to be killed?
Yeah, I just don't think infants deserve the death penalty. I think that an infant receiving the death penalty as like a punishment is, pretty unjust. It seems like in order to deserve that sort of treatment, you would need to do something wrong, and they didn't do anything wrong. So it would seem like they don't
The
deserve
Amalekites
to get.
didn't do anything wrong.
The Amalekite infants specifically didn't do anything wrong.
Well, again, if you're going with the idea that God is real and that God did give life to all things, it kind of raises the question of, just before I say this, I 100% agree with you. I don't think infants deserve the death penalty. I don't think anybody does.
Sure.
But my point is that if God is real, I think that he is, then it follows that he'd have the right to take that life as well.
Why? Why would he have that right?
Because he gave it along with everything else around us.
That doesn't seem like it would lead to the right to take life. For example, we might say, like, my mom gave birth to me, in some sense, she gave life to me. I don't think at that point, like, if I popped out of the womb and she decides, like, 5 years down the line that she doesn't like me, that she gets to, like, kill me or whatever.
Well, I guess that's just where we sort of disagree. I think that your mom carried you for 9 months, and that's a very honorable and respectable thing. 1000% props there. But like, what gave you life and what allows you to be alive today? Again, sort of back to my original claim, is that the thing keeping track of all this, the thing keeping everything constant, I think that's God, and that's why God has the right to do the things he does, is because he made everything, he keeps track of everything, he keeps everything consistent.
But when you say, like, he made everything, like,
yeah.
Do you mean like he caused this life to exist, or like what specifically are you saying there?
Yeah, like he's the ultimate like cause that affected everything. It's sort of how I might articulate that.
So
like, again, my point is about cause and effect, and like every effect has a cause, and if you kind of go down that line of thinking, you'll lead back to this like source cause, so to speak. And I'm saying, like, you don't have to go like back to the Big Bang or anything, but like just right now, like something is causing all this stuff to be invariant, is sort of my argument.
Okay, so why does God being like the first cause mean that he has the right to kill whoever he wants?
Because he's like it's like the admin, so to speak, of like everything.
But why does that mean that he has the
God
right?
is the truth, and
like I agree, like God certainly has the power to kill whoever he wants if he exists, but just because you have the power to do something doesn't give you the right to do it.
True. But again, the idea is that God is the truth, like by definition. So his motives would be just. And
that sounds like problematically circular, where you're saying like God commanding the death penalty for these Amalekites, including the infants, was just because everything God does is just. If God does something, that makes it just. And God is always motivated by justice. It kind of seems like a non-statement. You're just saying like, well, justice is whatever God happens to do. So if God, like slaughters like hundreds of thousands of infants, then that's just. And if he, I don't know, to go to like a separate point, if he gives like a law that says that you can own slaves, that's just too.
Yeah. If that's what he said, then yeah, that would be pretty horrifying. But at the same time, if that's what he said, would it be just? Because again, it is circular thinking, and I see what you're saying. But again, like going back to this like fundamental cause sort of claim that I'm making, it sort of just is what it is sort of my claim. I know that kind of sucks to talk, like it's hard to really have a discussion about that, but
A little bit.
again, yeah, my point again is just that God is the truth and God is just. And when you look at people like the Amalekites or the Canaanites, I'd argue that they were doing some pretty crazy stuff, and they reaped what they sowed.
Not the
And
infants,
again,
but
God gave those people life, though. So like, how does that play into your worldview?
I have no
like,
idea.
You're the admin of this channel right now. You can kick me. You could kick me off whenever you want. You have like the ability to.
So
and you can if I'm being rude or if you see me as being wrong. But like,
I think that there would be
I'm not
like
gonna sit here and say like
that's
evil
a
for you
really
to
good
do it.
example. I think that there's like tons of stuff that I could do to you that would be like horribly unjust, even though I'm in control of this live stream. For example, I could start like, I could unexpectedly pull up like pictures of like medical gore, horrifying images. And I think that that would be like a gravely unjust thing to do to you, even though it is my channel.
Well, that just means that you're a just guy, I guess. So appreciate that. But again, like looking back at these,
No, sorry, go for it.
But looking back at these like ancient civilizations, and like even right now, sort of the fact of life is that one day you're gonna die, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with respect to God, like he ultimately exists knowing that life is finite. So it ultimately is up to him how that pans out. And to some people would say that makes life special because it's a finite thing. And
I have no idea why God being the cause of it means that he has like the right to do this. Like I guess like the connection there is still unclear to me. Like, does God have moral obligations, or like is he?
Well, what defines morality is, I guess, what follows from that.
Is there anything that God couldn't do because it would be immoral to do?
Well, that, in my opinion, would be sort of a contradiction because God is the truth. He's what defined the truth. And then for him to contradict that, well, for him to contradict that isn't something that he's incapable of doing per se, but also he is fully true. So I don't know if that really suffices as an answer, but
I guess like maybe
he's the one defining everything.
Like I hear you, but maybe like if I restate the question, we might be able to get like a clearer answer. Fuck, I can't remember jack shit. Is there anything that God could do such that he wouldn't be fulfilling his moral obligations? Like, is there anything that God simply can't do because if God were to do it, that would be unethical, and God only does ethical things, so he couldn't do that? Like, I don't know, for example, presumably you want to say that God can't like go around like raping children because that would be, an unethical thing for him to do, and he would never do that.
So you're asking if God can ever be wrong? Is that sort of?
Is there anything that if God ever did it, it would be like a bad thing to do?
I think I know where you're going with this, but is there anything that you can do where it would be wrong? If he like wanted it to be wrong, I guess, strictly speaking, like he did something with the intent of it being wrong, and that's sort of supported in the scripture. They talk about like a pot being formed for the purpose of breaking, so like that sort of behavior. Does that make sense? Like you make something for it to fail.
Maybe I'll just ask the question. Do you think like if God raped a child, would that be good?
No.
Okay,
I don't think he'd do that.
Sure. Okay, then there's like God has like some ethical obligations that are beyond just like whatever God says goes.
That are defined by his word.
I think you're gonna have a
Is
rough
the
time
biblical-
finding the place where it says grape is always wrong. For example, if you grape a virgin in Deuteronomy, the only punishment there is that you have to marry her and you have to give her father like I think 40 shekels of silver. So presumably God, if he's willing to cough up 40 shekels of silver, there would be nothing wrong with him like graping a virgin.
Uh,
I can pull
I
the
guess
verse
there's
if
that,
you
yeah.
want.
Yeah, no, I 100% believe you. You're talking about Deuteronomy, which goes into the laws of the Israelites.
Yeah.
Um,
No, go for it.
So I'm just kind of confused about like what you're getting at here. Are you saying that you disagree with the laws laid out in Deuteronomy, therefore God isn't true, or like I'm trying to
Just that if we
articulate-
accept like the basic premise that these laws are horrific, then that would provide substantial evidence against God's existence, because we would then have like this all good God who's giving laws that say you can own slaves, you can beat your slaves, you can sell your daughter into slavery, you can like rape a virgin, and as long as you give her father 40 shekels of silver, she has to marry you for life. All the other laws too. There's just like a lot of like
again,
horrific ones.
Yeah, that's in the old law, though. That's in the Old Testament. But the whole idea of like, again, if you want to talk to like a secular Jewish guy, maybe he could give a more accurate answer. But again, like the idea of the whole Bible is that you have Jesus Christ coming in the flesh to fulfill the law and to bring upon the law of righteousness, which is where like this whole thing of like do unto others as you'd want done unto yourself comes from. So yeah, I think those laws were pretty horrific from our modern context. But again, like there's very much a larger picture at play there. So like in the context of then and there, maybe it wasn't as bad. But now, yeah, I 1,000% agree. It's pretty crazy to look back at those laws. In the same way, it's crazy to look back and say like, hey, you can't eat these kind of animals, or you can't wear certain things or whatnot. But like that's not the law now, is sort of my point.
So I think probably the biggest problem with that is that Jesus tells you explicitly that that is the law now in Matthew 5. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So he's literally saying the law is still in effect. Don't tell people to stop following the law. The law is still in effect.
Well, what did he say at the beginning of Matthew 5? You got to read the whole chapter.
Sure. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. It doesn't really seem like the context added anything.
Well, can you keep reading it?
Sure. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That? Okay, sure.
Yeah, no, just finish out Matthew
Yep.
5 is my point.
You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I tell you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you'll be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you'll be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to hell, or to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift to the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Concerning adultery, you have heard that it is... how fucking long? Okay, this chapter goes on. So, do you want to read?
I mean, I'd encourage you to just keep reading it in your own time, but my point
I've already
is
read
that
the
he
entire
came-
Bible.
Okay, well then I guess you know the rest of what Matthew 5 says. But the point is that he came to fulfill the law, and the whole point is that it's unchanged, but fundamentally the idea of the law was to stop people from doing evil things. So again, looking back 4,000 years ago in the context of the Canaanites, the Amalekites, the Israelites, again, all of them were pretty evil people. Is again, a salient theme of the New Testament is that the law was made for sinners alike, and that it was trying to guide them out of that. So yeah, looking back on it now, it's pretty horrifying, the stuff that they had to be course corrected from. But the idea of the law was to course correct them. That was the whole point. And the idea of Jesus Christ, especially living now, we can see the fruits of that, is that you get this law of righteousness that says others as you want to do done unto yourself. Love others, love your neighbors as yourself. So yeah, I don't really see the problem there.
Unheard of in the Old
He came to
Testament.
fulfill the law, not
I just said unheard of in the Old Testament, except that's from the Old Testament. Love thy neighbor as you love thyself is from the Old Testament originally. It's from the same section where God is saying you can own thy neighbor as property.
Yeah, and I mean, effectively that can happen still today, right? Like,
and that's horrible.
boss,
it's like a horrible injustice.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but
so
again, the point is to
why wouldn't
the point
God
is to course
say
correct
to not do
these
that?
people. So to own your neighbor, or
yeah,
did you
like
read that verse
he says
specifically? Like,
explicitly in Leviticus 25:44 through 46. Let me read it. 25. (44 through 46). As for the male and female slaves whom you may have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also acquire them from among the aliens residing with you and from their families who are with you, who have been born in your land. They may be your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property. These you may treat as slaves, but as for your fellow Israelites, no one shall rule over the other with harshness.
Yeah. And again, that was the theme of the time. But now,
Why
again,
not say no?
Because
Why wouldn't God say don't do that?
they would probably just reject that.
Okay,
Again, like you're
then they go to
talking to
hell.
these evil, wicked. Then you're talking to these evil and wicked people who he wants to course correct.
They
So
didn't
he's
have
giving them this
slaves.
guide.
They just came from the Exodus. They just exodused out of Egypt. This would have been the perfect opportunity before the institution of slavery was established to say, don't do that. You guys were
But that
slaves.
was their custom. But that was their custom, you could argue.
But
Like
they
that was the way of the world then, is kind of my point. And it's
But-
awful and it's heinous to look at now to like force people to do these things. But again, like looking at the New Testament, you see stories of like the Samaritans and Jesus Christ saying like, hey, if you see one of them hurt, you got to help them. You got to do what's right. So again, he came to fulfill that law. And again, like a salient theme of the Old Testament is that the Israelites, even being given these like very lax rules, like kept falling away from them. They kept doing evil things. So
God had no problem completely outlawing specific practices. You know, if his concern is, well, if I tell them no slaves, then they simply won't listen to me. I mean, then why would he tell them like no shellfish? And also, like, who
Well, I mean,
cares if they
people think
listen to
abstain
him
from
or not?
shellfish
You
is a
know,
lot.
presumably, if they don't listen to him about owning slaves, you know, if they're slave owners, then they go to hell.
yeah, if they do evil things, yeah, if you die in your sins, you go
But-
to hell. It's
It's not sin according to
That
the Old
works.
Testament.
well, again, that was the law at the time, and Jesus Christ came to fulfill it.
Which we agree
in the
means
context,
like
then
it
and
still
there,
stands.
yeah, it's
Sorry to interrupt. Gosh, I'm like jumping in a bit more now, but when we read through Matthew 5:17 through 19, Jesus is saying like this is like I've come not to abolish the law but to fulfill. Let's make sure that we're on the same page with this interpretation. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. So you think that the law refers to the Levitical law, correct?
I'd have to look into that more. But yeah, the law that had been built up to that point. I don't know if it's specifically the law in Leviticus because of what may have come later. I'm still reading through the Old Testament, but yeah, let's just say it is. Yeah, the law of Leviticus.
It seems
go
like
with that.
Jesus is then saying that this law has not changed in any way. If he's saying like not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass until heaven and earth pass away, well, heaven and earth are
My
still
phone's
here.
about to die. Hold on. Oh, dang. Hello.
Yep.
Sorry, you're in the middle of your point, and my phone almost died.
Oop. Am I still there? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. So
Hello.
so this law is referring to the law, including the law of Moses, among other laws. And Jesus is saying that not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. So it would seem to indicate that Jesus is saying that the law remains unchanged until heaven and earth pass away, which of course it hasn't. So
Yeah, but that he also came to fulfill that law, and the idea of that law was to bring people out of their unrighteousness. Like that's the whole point of Jesus Christ's manifestation, is to bring upon the law of righteousness.
okay, so do you agree
So
or
yeah, those things did
disagree
exist, but
that it's changed? Do you think the law has changed? Do you think that it's
Not in
permissible
a
to
s-
break those commandments?
I don't think you're breaking those commandments, but because of the sacrifice that was made and the penalty that Christ bore by dying for our sins, he gave us a new and better covenant. That's how I describe that. But again, like the point of those laws was to stop people from sinning. And it didn't work, even though they were still allowed to do like pretty crazy stuff from our standard.
Okay. So are you or are you not allowed to own slaves according to Jesus?
According to Jesus, are you allowed to own slaves?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're allowed to hire people. That's
It's
pretty
not slavery.
clear. Well, if they're in bondage to that money, is it? I don't know. I'd say no, because again, you have to treat others as you would like to be treated, right?
Okay, so then you would say that some of the law has passed away.
It's been fulfilled.
But has it passed away?
That's what just said. That's what he said, though. He came to fulfill the law. So what is that? What does fulfilling the law mean to you then?
Not
I guess?
abolish is what Jesus is making clear. What Jesus
But
is
what is
saying is, I
fulfilling
am
it?
the Messiah from the law of old. However, you know, don't think that that means that things are different. Things are still the same.
But what did him fulfilling it do? Like, what did that mean to you?
He's just like fulfilling. Well, I don't think that he did, but you know,
then-
he's like the chosen one. He's supposed to.
Yeah, but like, what did that
He's
do?
supposed to like liberate
To the religion.
like the Israelites from their suffering.
Well, he came to bring upon the remission of sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
But
yeah, he came to fulfill the law, and that
okay,
opened up
but do you
things
think that the law, like parts of the law, have passed, or are they still in effect?
I guess I'm just kind of hung up on what you mean by that.
What do you think Jesus means when he says, "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished"? What do you think that means?
I think that it means exactly what it says it means. And that the law states that those are the punishments if you treat people like that. But as Jesus later goes on to say, if you even hate somebody, that's akin to murder. So, again,
So you're saying that it says exactly what it's saying. To me, like what it clearly seems to be saying is that the law is still in effect, that you cannot break the law still.
yeah.
Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I agree with that, but I think that the law is then fulfilled with the law of righteousness, which is, again, this is kind of a long-winded thing, but this idea that you bring upon the Holy Spirit and are walking in faith with God. And I guess,
Okay, so then you do think that the law is unchanged.
yes.
Okay, and then the law included slavery, so then this would still be in effect in the law that Jesus affirms.
Is it in support of slavery in our modern sense, though? Like, that's kind of where I'm hung up on. Like,
Yeah.
what-
So the slavery in Leviticus is people owned as property. When we speak of slavery, what we're talking about is when somebody is owned by is owned as property. And that's pretty clearly what's going on there. You know, the word property and possession appears in the description, like the relationship between the slave and the person who owns them in Leviticus 25:44 through 46.
Yeah, but is Jesus Christ condoning people to go enslave other people here? I'm just kind of confused about what you're trying to imply.
It's in
with
the
that.
law. I mean, it seems like Jesus isn't getting rid of
I
this
mean, it's in
statute.
the law about what you do if they assault their property, but it doesn't say, hey, go continue this property. Like, it doesn't say go enslave more people. Like, it says to
But
do unto others
what
as
the
you
law
would.
says is that you can own slaves, and Jesus is saying the law is unchanged. It would seem to follow there that Jesus is fine with you enslaving people. And if you want more
So
evidence
long
for
as you
that, he
don't-
never says to not do that. You have to, I don't know, you have to like work from principles like, well, do unto others as you want done unto you in order to arrive at conclusions like that. But I mean, at that point, it's just a contradiction.
Well, again, if you're doing something unto someone else that you wouldn't want done unto yourself, then you're breaking this new fulfilled law of righteousness, is the argument. So if you're going and enslaving people, I imagine that's not what you want done unto yourself, and that's not how you would treat your neighbor, right? So again, like looking back at these like ancient civilizations, being owned as a slave then was very clearly not the same as being owned as a slave in like 1700s America, or like on a plantation in like
what was different?
Cuba or something. Well, I mean, specifically in Leviticus, they say that if you strike your slave and they lose a tooth or something, they can go free. That's very clear.
But like, what happens if you like beat them viciously and there's no permanent damage done?
Isn't that kind of like an oxymoron? Or not an oxymoron, a contradiction?
No, right? But there could be like temporary damage done.
Well, isn't there something about that in Leviticus too? And again, like
there's like verses that say like you can't do permanent damage, you can't knock out their eyes, can't knock out their teeth, can't kill them. But it does say that you can beat them. It says explicitly in Exodus 21:20-21. I'll read the verse to you. 20-21, it says, when a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished. But if the slave survives a day or two, there's no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. So it's saying you can beat your slave as long as you don't kill them, you're good to go.
But again, the whole point of the law of righteousness was to say that you can't do unto your neighbor, who at the time of Jesus Christ coming, expanded outside of the Israelites into all the Gentiles. So
do you think the old law, or like the law of Leviticus and the law of Moses, do you think that this law is in line with the principle that you should do unto others as you want others to do unto you?
No, in the sense that it is of the Old Testament, so it hadn't been fulfilled yet. But again, the idea is that once it is fulfilled, you have these new ideas that sort of tie it full circle and then allow people to honestly engage with anybody. So you're not trying to enslave people. You're trying to hurt people or like try to justify malice towards other people. Like
I thought we agreed with respect to Matthew 5 that this meant that the old law is unchanged, that law is still in effect. So if Jesus is putting forward something new that contradicts it, it seems like we have a problem. You know, typically having like two incompatible properties is fine if what goes on is like a change. If you change from having one of those properties to having the other one, right? Like if I change from being, 5'10" to being 5'11", that's fine because there was like a change there. I'm not like both simultaneously. But if what you're saying is that the law is still in effect, and then also there's this new thing that contradicts the law, well, at that point, it just sounds like Jesus is being irrational.
So I guess that kind of comes back to the point of like, what does it mean to fulfill the law? You've read the whole Bible. I'd be interested to hear your perspective. What does that mean to fulfill the law?
Well, it just means that he's the Messiah. He fulfills like the messianic prophecy.
Yes, but like, what does that mean for the Israelites and how they treat other people and how they treat the world at large? They aren't just the chosen people anymore. They're just one of many of God's creation.
Mm-hmm. Then that would seem to indicate like a change in the old law.
Well, it seems like it was fulfilling it, right?
It seems like it's like changing. When you say fulfill, do you think fulfilling includes like changing it?
I mean, like strictly speaking, yeah, but in the context of what Christ was mentioning as not changing the law, no. Because Christ was saying that the point of the law was to bring about righteousness. But they kept turning away from that. So he came to fulfill it and then offered it up for everybody else as well.
Do you see how like one might come away with the impression that that's like a contradiction?
Not really, Because again,
It sounds like you're saying like fulfill both involves like changing the law, but also like not changing the law.
Well, the point of the law was to bring about righteousness, which he then goes on to explain throughout the rest of Matthew. So, not really.
I mean, you know, so the law is in effect or it's not in effect?
It is in effect, but it was fulfilled, resulting in this change for everybody.
Okay, so parts of the law did pass.
No.
But it changed for everybody. Some of the old stuff is no longer in effect.
It's in effect for everybody, but it's fundamentally changed by the fact that the point of the law is like brought forward, and it's not the like keeping the jot and tittle of it. You're not trying to keep like the literal like semantics of the law, if you will, but rather you're trying to keep the point of the law, which was to bring them closer to God to righteousness.
That seems like exactly what Jesus is saying with like it seems like Jesus is exactly focused on like the little details and the semantics of it. I'll read the verse again. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. It sounds like he's saying like the little stuff matters and that you can't disregard anything, not even like the tiny laws. It sounds like Jesus is saying you should be like super anal about like following the old law.
So I guess I just disagree about that. Like, again, the point of that old law was to bring about righteousness. And again, like, that was the whole point of the new and better covenant. So
would you say that you break some of the commandments? Like some of the commandments of the old law?
No.
So you don't eat like any of the foods that they said you can't eat?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the 10 Commandments. No, I definitely break those laws, I guess. But again, they were fulfilled and brought upon a new and better covenant.
Okay, maybe I could read this verse to you and you can give me your interpretation. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
Can you highlight more explicitly on what those laws are being referred to? Or
yeah, like the law that he fulfilled, the law of the Old Testament.
So hold on, I'm going to pull up Matthew 5 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when it says till all be fulfilled, what does that mean to you in verse 18?
For is that at the very end of 18?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Specifically what that's referring to is the same thing from earlier, that until heaven and earth pass away, none of this is going to change. It's using like a Greek rhetorical device called parallelism, which is like when you have I'll look up like an example of parallelism. It'll make the point for me, but it's just when you have like a part of the sentence that parallels like a later part of the sentence. Oh, yeah, sure. Her purpose was to impress the ignorant, to perplex the dubious, and to confound the scrupulous. That's a great example of parallelism. That there's like this like parallel structure about like what the subject is doing. That's what's going on here in Matthew 5:18. It's the same sort of like rhetorical device of saying, for truly I tell you, until this event happens, then it tells you what's going to be there, and then it reiterates like until that event happens. It's saying, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. I'm so stupid. The verse itself includes even more parallelism. The not one letter, not one stroke of a letter is itself parallelism.
Interesting, yeah. So when it says, whosoever shall break the least of these commandments and shall teach men, so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven, but whosoever shall do and teach them the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So like when Jesus is like surmising all those laws, the laws of the prophet and the message of the prophets, like what is that to you? What is that like overarching law?
Wait, sorry, for which one? Where?
So when you continue reading, I just read through 19 and then referred back to 17, where he says that he's not come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. Like, I know we're just talking in circles here and it kind of sucks, but my point is that Jesus Christ was fulfilling these things that were trying to be articulated by those laws in the past.
Yes.
So,
and he's saying, I'm here to fulfill the prophecies,
yeah.
But I'm not, like, these laws aren't going away. You are not free to start breaking these laws.
Mm-hmm.
So then you agree that the laws are still in effect.
I'd say that you'd have to go read Romans to like really highlight what I'm talking about, but like the law of righteousness is what culminates all of these, like the initial point of these laws was to bring about this righteousness that meant that you should do unto others as you want done unto yourself.
Well, that's kind of like the peculiar thing, is that it seems like a lot of people will place the word of Paul above the word of Jesus. You know, Paul contradicts what Jesus says.
Okay, maybe if I just keep it in Matthew then. So when he says like exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, what is he talking about there? The scribes and the Pharisees.
He's saying, okay, so what he's doing is he's like further reiterating the point that he's making throughout the entire passage, which is that if you want to enter into the kingdom of heaven, you need to follow these laws, that you need to, you can't be disregarding the laws like the Pharisees are doing.
Well, no, they're keeping the law. That's kind of the whole point, is that they're keeping
the maybe I'm confused. I thought the Pharisees in like the New Testament were like disregarding the law. Maybe I'm confusing them with like a different group. I thought that was like the whole thing about Jesus coming into the temple and like flipping over tables and shit. Was because they had like butchered the law. Oh, am I thinking of the Sadducees?
Could be. I know what you're talking about, though. That the temple shall be a place of worship. They made it a den of robbers. But yeah, going forward in Matthew 22 specifically. Where is it? So Matthew 22, 37 through 41.
37 through 41?
Yeah.
Matthew 7?
Matthew 22, 37 through 41.
22, 37 through 31. Or wait, through 41?
40. 40. Let's just go to 40.
Okay.
So again, it just kind of reiterates this point that I'm trying to make, that the commandments and the laws of old were meant to bring about this love for God, which again, old Israel didn't have. That's why they kept falling away.
Wait, let's read the verse first. What does it say?
Matthew 22.
22, 37 through 40.
Yeah, Jesus said unto them, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
Yeah, the law of Moses.
Yeah, so like that's the intent of that law.
Okay, do you think that the Mosaic law is in line with love thy neighbor as you love thyself?
In the context of the Israelites, yeah, where they saw themselves as the chosen people and they were God's like people and whatnot.
Did they love thy neighbor as they love themselves?
Well, when they see thy neighbor as their fellow Israelites, I'd say yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, who gave the law? Did God see their neighbor as the fellow Israelites?
Yeah, he said you are my people. So
Did he see their neighbor as anybody other than the Israelites?
Are you talking about Old Testament or New Testament?
Yeah, in the Old Testament, when God was giving the law, did he see the neighbor as being anything other than the Israelites?
I don't know.
It says you can do some pretty problematic things to your neighbor in the Old Testament.
Like the Amalekites and Canaanites, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, or like, you can own your neighbor as a slave.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was the sentiment at the time. Again, like that was the context that the Israelites, God's people at the time,
Was
were
that
existing.
God's sentiment?
Was that God's sentiment?
Yeah.
Well, his will ultimately is that all would be saved and that all turn to him. But again, these are the people who he's fighting against at the time. Like that's the whole story of the Old Testament, is that this nation of Israel that's supposed to bring about this Messiah and whatever has to like go through all these trials, fighting these other people. These other people also owned slaves at the time. Like everyone back then, like that was a very real
that's
thing
wrong.
that everyone did.
It was like really wrong. It was a bad thing to do, which
And
is
why do
why
you-
it's
why
so
do you believe
eyebrow
that,
raising
though?
when
Why do
God
you-
does it.
Why do you believe that though?
Why do I believe that slavery is wrong?
Yeah, like where did that come
Yeah,
from?
because it violates people's rights to freedom and well-being.
Yeah, but like again, someone could easily just say like, since they have the right, or since they have the strength to do something, they can do it either way, right?
Well, that's a contradiction. By this very logic, they would need to hold that it's totally fine for somebody with more strength than them to come and like foil their plans, which means that actually they can't claim a right to do anything, because in doing so, they're forfeiting the ability to be free from stronger people coming along and fucking with them.
Well, no, that's just kind of I'm not supporting this obviously, but that's just kind of the conceited nature, is like, if you're not the strongest, then
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
don't have like this like divine mandate or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a contradictory viewpoint. The person
It's
who
not
wants to bully
contradictory,
weaker
it's just like-
people need to claim the right to do that. They need to claim the freedom and well-being for them to go and bully these other people. And in doing so, they deprive them of their right to freedom and well-being. But also, if that's the caveat that they add in, that they're able to do this because they're stronger than the other people, then by this logic, if somebody came along who was stronger than them, they'd have to forfeit their right, which means that they both have the right and don't have the right to bully
Well, they
these
have
weaker
the right
people.
in the context that they're stronger than other people, right? Well, I don't need to like split hairs about this. My point is that finding this stuff to be like bad comes from the perspective that we have now, versus then, again, you had a very different people who were going under very different rules and customs, and we're in a very different world, And I think that
Did
when you
God
look
have
back-
different values?
No, again, the whole point of these commandments was
Then
to
why are
bring
the laws
about.
so horrific? Do the laws reflect
Because-
God's values?
They were trying to steer the Israelites from their evil ways. Like I don't know. It's like if you had someone addicted to something, and then the difference between like slowly weaning them off of it, and then or versus going cold turkey, right? Like one's gonna have a much greater chance of succeeding than the other. Is what.
Well,
That's
okay,
how
like
I
if somebody's child had like a substance abuse problem, okay, this depends on the substance, but like other than like the person's literally gonna die if they do cold turkey, like surely the solution is not, you know, give them a little bit of the substance.
Well, I mean, that would be the argument, is that the Israelites would literally die if they didn't have these laws in a world where people are trying to enslave and kill them.
If only they had like an all-powerful friend who could prevent that.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah,
wouldn't
pretty
God
good.
prevent that and then say no slaves?
Because ultimately it's down to their choice. Like, it's kind of the whole.
That's not what the law is saying. The law isn't saying like you have the choice to enslave people or to not enslave people. It's saying
No,
you have
but-
my permission to enslave people.
No, that's not my point that I'm trying to get at. The point is that the Israelites had the choice to love God, and presumably the way to maximize that was to allow them to take captive the people they conquered and
Why?
then use them. Well, I mean, why did anyone do that back then?
Not out of love, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
That's-
if somebody came to me and said, you know, I love you so much as like a dedication of how much I love you, I like butchered my neighbors, I'd be pretty weirded out by that. I think that that's quite a weird expression of love.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, again, if you look through the whole Old Testament, you see these people that, I mean, even the Egyptians, they said God gave them the option to just let them go. Like there was always that option. Or you have Sodom and Gomorrah, where you have God sending the prophets saying like, hey, stop this degenerate stuff or bad things are going to happen.
So when
Or you
God
had
is
the
giving the
Canaan-
law
wait,
that says
wait,
you can
wait,
own
can I-
slaves, do you think he's saying you have the free will to own slaves?
Well,
Or do
again,
you think that he's
that-
saying like you have my permission to own slaves?
I think that the people at the time, like that was just a normal thing. And I think that when you're trying to appeal to those people, that's like the concession he made, you could say. But also like the context of a slave back then isn't the same as like
What's
what
different?
I learned of, what I learned of as a slave growing up. Like
But wait,
growing
but
up,
what's different between them?
you could like murder a slave and like there's no repercussion for that.
Okay, well, you could murder a slave and there's only like slight repercussion. There's like a financial repercussion in this circumstance.
Well, again, there's also the spiritual side of that as well. They say that that is like a damning thing to try to murder people unjustly.
Hmm.
And again, like my whole,
But I mean,
Again, my
well,
whole-
I mean, couldn't God say like it's not unjust to murder your slaves since he controls life and death?
it's not unjust.
Yeah, couldn't God give like a law in the Old Testament saying like it's actually just to murder your slaves?
I suppose, like strictly speaking, he could, but he didn't. So
Okay.
again, like it just plays into this like historical narrative. Like that's how it panned out, and
Do you
that's
think
how
God changed his mind about slavery?
I think that everyone's a slave to something, and I think that, especially in the context of the Old Testament, like being a slave to your empire or a like quote unquote slave to your master or whatnot was like being bought into this family. And again, it's a very weird thing to think about now, especially, but I don't think it has the same context as like African slaves or like the Greek slaves or who else? Maybe the Mongols. I don't know, but like they treated them as like a member of the family. So
Yeah,
there's like that
you
kind of
know,
context.
that's just like not true, right? I mean, I've never been beaten with a rod by my family members.
Well, back then you've never been like hit with like a belt or anything. Like you didn't have. You didn't get
maybe my parents
chastised or
did,
anything?
but like surely if
Well,
my
then-
parents
well, then
came in
there's
here
that,
right
like,
now
well,
and like
dude.
beat me with a rod, that would be like a horrific thing to do. And in fact,
Well,
you
yeah,
know, when
it's
my
just, like,
parents
out of
spanked me, that's
nowhere,
also a
but again-
horrific thing to do, right? Super unjust.
Well, again, if it's for the point of chastisement, which again was the
Is
intent
there some
of
like
the-
separate way to chastise your children? You know,
Uh,
maybe you could like explain to them the error of their ways or something.
personally, I just don't see the efficacy in that. I remember growing up and thinking that same way, but like, I don't know. I have friends who didn't really get the belt, so to speak, and it just kind of goes sideways.
Okay,
So,
well, I
don't
mean,
know.
you
just
know,
agree to disagree.
I have like 80,000 friends in my like peer-reviewed study, like a meta-analysis that evaluates like, you know, the outcomes of spanking your children, and the outcome is across literally every psychological metric, the children that get spanked end up in like a much worse place.
By what metric?
Literally
curious.
every psychological metric. I can pull some up for you if you'd like. Let me find the study. So, spanking meta-analysis. Oh yeah, sorry. When I said it was 80,000 friends, it was actually 160,000 friends. It's double that. Let me find where there's like a list of like all of the places where the kids end up bad. I'll just read the Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah. I'm trying to find like a good snippet to read.
Could you like? Is there a what's that number called that like identifies the paper?
The DOI?
Yeah, the DOI.
Yeah. I got you. Or maybe it's not the DOI, but or it's the PMC ID. So PMC 7992110. It's titled "Spanking and Child Outcomes: Old Controversies and New Meta-Analyses." Okay, I found a good snippet. At least I did. I'll find it again.
Again, I'd like to thank you for just letting me stay up here so long.
Yeah.
Like, flips out of it, but
Okay, I'll just go to the discussion section. Oh, sure. Okay, here it is. I'm sorry. I could have just gone down to the discussion section for the beginning. Spanking is associated with higher risk for detrimental outcomes. 13 of the 17 child outcomes examined were found to be significantly associated with parents' use of spanking. Among the outcomes in childhood, spanking was associated with more aggression, more antisocial behavior, more externalizing problems, more internalizing problems, more mental health problems, and more negative relationships with parents. Spanking was also significantly associated with lower moral internalization, lower cognitive ability, and lower self-esteem. The largest effect size was for physical abuse. The more children are spanked, the greater the risk that they will be physically abused by their parents. 3 of the 4 adult outcomes were significantly associated with a history of spanking from parents, adult antisocial behavior, adult mental health problems, and adult support for physical punishment. While these findings suggest that there may be a lasting impact of spanking that reach into adulthood, they are only suggestive as adults who engage in antisocial behavior or who are experiencing mental health problems may focus on negative memories of their childhood and report more spanking than they actually received. Okay. I think that makes the point pretty well. It just seems like that's like the sort of thing God would know, right? Like God would know that it's like horrible for your outcome.
Sorry, did you give that number?
Yeah, sure. I can give it again. PMC 7992110. Once again, 7992110.
Yeah, I got it now. Sorry, I was just looking up counter studies to that, but
did you find any?
I found one allegedly.
What's the name?
Legislation on. Well, this is to support legislation. Conference for use. You'd have to give me a minute, but I'll just concede the point.
That's okay.
So, yeah. I guess just like anecdotally, I'd say that having that kind of like threat of like some physical like repercussion, I think that's kind of intuitive anyways. Like, okay, if you're going to jail or something, or if you're in threat of some kind of physical punishment, you're much less likely to do that thing again. That's sort of the rationale, right?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that spanking is like effective at stopping the behavior in the short term, and then it just like fucks up the child for the long term. So,
well, I think that has to be coupled with other things too. I'm not just saying like beat people randomly, obviously, but like the point is that if you have some kind of, I don't know, situation like that where you kind of are forced to respect the reality of your situation or the consequences of your actions, then yeah, you're going to respect it a little bit more. And, you know, I think that's, again, I'd have to look into it, but yeah, that's an interesting meta-analysis. I'll look into that.
I guess we kind of touched on this verse earlier, but I'm curious, do you, I mean, would you say like the verse that says that like rape victims have to marry their rapists? Let me pull up the verse specifically. Is this 22, 28 through 29? I think it might be. Yeah. That's the verse. If a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife because he violated her. He shall not be permitted to divorce her as long as he lives.
So you said the grape word.
Yeah.
But it uses seizes there. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, seizing means like take something forcibly.
I'd be interested in looking at the Greek side of that, but
so my understanding is that there isn't like a, well, first of all, it's Hebrew, but my understanding is that there isn't like a Hebrew word for like rape per se. There was just like a bunch of different, like phrases for it.
Well, I think that might be kind of jumping to a conclusion then, wouldn't it? If there's not even a word for that in the language.
No, it says, okay, it says he has violated her.
Well, yeah, violated in the context of the Old Testament means just having sex out of marriage.
Where?
Outside of marriage.
Where?
I'd ask you to look into that for yourself, but I can look at it right now, but
you're not going to find anything like that. In fact, I had this discussion like just a couple of days ago where it turns out actually it doesn't really seem like the Bible says that per se. There's like some stuff in the New Testament, but there's like nothing in the Old Testament. If you want more evidence for this as well, it uses the same word in like the verse above. But if a man meets the engaged woman in the open country and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. You shall do nothing to the young woman. The young woman has not committed an offense punishable by death, because this case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbor. Since he found her in the open country, the engaged woman may have cried for help, but there was no one to rescue her. So in this case, it's saying like seize, and it's like not the woman's fault if she gets seized. Would seem to indicate that it's saying like, you know, it's.
Doesn't that just kind of imply that being seized is like something that the woman could choose to do?
No, the opposite. That this is something that she bears no responsibility for.
So that was the verse above, right?
Yeah.
Where it was the man would then be killed, right? Is that?
Yes.
Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, the woman does nothing wrong if she gets seized, and then the man gets put to death.
So then the next statement says,
yeah,
he's seized.
If a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Because he violated her, he shall not be permitted to divorce her for as long as he lives.
I'd say that I'd have to look into that more, but again, Matthew 22, it sort of just kind of explains what the intent of that law was. That you should, Matthew 39, that thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So
it's hard for me to read that into these verses. Maybe this is my friend Joel. Maybe Joel can help us.
Have you guys ever heard the story of the raped concubine in Judges 19?
Tell me, remind me.
This horrific story of it mirrors the Sodom and Gomorrah story, where there's a bunch of men who want to assault this other guy, and they say, hey, don't do that to me, just take my concubine instead, and you can rape her, it will say in the translation. And there's this Hebrew word that, I'm not a Hebrew speaker, but anah is the word that they use there. And then in Judges 20, it says, after these men have all gang raped her, I have to say, and she dies in the doorway, the man says, these men have anah, they've raped my concubine. This is the same word that is used when it says violated in verse 29 there in Deuteronomy 22.
Okay,
it's also the same word.
Yeah, I do remember this verse. This shit was like crazy. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's a horrific story. It's the same word that's used at the end of the captive verse, where you can take a captive and you can't sell her as a slave because you've dishonored her. That's the same word. And it's the same word for what this guy named Shechem did to Dinah in, I think it's Genesis 31 or something like that, which is he raped her as well. So every time we see it, and especially in Judges 19, it's very obvious that this is like a gang rape. It's that same word. So to imagine that the guy just wooed her and violated her because he took her virginity is a naive reading of that.
Mm.
So again, I'd have to look more into it, especially in the Old Testament. But again, my whole point sort of remains the same, that the intent of these laws was to steer the Israelites at the time away from their unrighteousness, which,
how does it do that?
Again, as you clearly shown, they were pretty heinous.
But God gives the laws. He doesn't say like... Really...
Go ahead.
Well, it just seems like how does it, who is it like steering to say, like, rape victims, you must marry your rapists?
Well, again, in that context, I'd argue that it could have been just them fornicating outside of marriage. Again, if they're talking about being discovered, like, what is the implication there? Like, wouldn't she tell somebody, not then like have this be like a secret or something? Like, I just have to read more into that. But again, like, the whole point is to have them eventually learn to love thy neighbor as thyself. That's what I think that.
And how does this help with that?
I think it's interesting.
I just got a call from a family member.
Sorry, do you have to go?
I have to go in a bit, but I just want to wrap this up if you guys could.
I just think it's interesting that, like, if you read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, there are these very similar chapters that say, hey, if you follow these laws, you guys are going to get good crops. I'm going to reward you. If you don't, here's a litany of horrific things I'm going to that are going to befall you and I'm going to do to you. You're going to eat your kids. You're going to be taken by your enemies. Animals are going to kill you. You're going to starve to death. You know, all of these things because you don't follow these laws that I really, really like. You know, that's what God is saying. And when we look at the, like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, the main commandment in, like, wherever Matthew or whatever it was, the original iteration of that is also in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 6, and it's sandwiched in this, like, chapter that's just saying, follow my laws, write them on the back of your eyelids, write them on the fence post. You have to follow my laws. All I want you to do is follow my laws, commands, and decrees. Right? This is all he wants. He loves this. Psalm says it's his righteous and eternal law. So to be like, nah, it was just like, best he could have done. That's just not reflected in the text.
Well, I think it kind of is, especially through the narrative of the Israelites. Gosh, I can't say anything. But the Israelites not being able to even follow that, like these were people who were brought down in sin, and God's trying to take them up out of that. And again, like you're saying in the Old Testament, the idea is that you should love thy neighbor as thyself. And so again, I'd have to read more into these specific verses you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure, as you can all see, it's a fairly salient theme throughout the whole Bible.
I think it's just like trying to take these platitudes and then just wipe over all the obvious stuff in the Old Testament that's saying, hey, follow these laws. They're really good. And they involve marrying your attacker. You know what I mean?
Well, again, in Matthew 5, as Ian was pointing out, you have to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. So there is that. And I believe Christ came to fulfill that law. So I guess we can just agree to disagree. But again, I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much for coming on up. Oop, okay, wait, fuck. I thought I pressed the button too many times. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on up. A bit of a wild one, but
yeah, that was a wild call. Well, enjoy.
Yep. Yeah, have a good one.
See ya.
Let's read some supers. Cow Abductor, thanks so much for the super chat. I'm here for the crash outs. Hide your cows. I don't know. I have a bad feeling about Cow Abductor. Kieran Dave, thanks so much for the super chat. The worst part about Orthobro Precept in 2026 is that it's boring / predictable. It's confusing how popular it remains given how poorly it performs. That's true. I think that it's more of a rhetorical strategy than it is like an actual good argument. That's presumably why nobody in the literature takes it seriously. At least the precept variety of it, nobody takes seriously. There are some people that take things like the fact that we have moral knowledge is more expected if God exists. Like maybe you want to make the evidential argument that, thank you so much, that the laws of logic are more expected if God exists, that this moral knowledge is more expected if God exists, but the way that they run it is dog shit terrible. It's genuinely such dog shit. It's probably the worst argument, philosophically speaking, that's on the market right now. I actually think that you'd get way farther with some variant of look at the trees than you would with precept. But I think that there are fun rhetorical counters. I think the one that I run quite frequently is that, they're going to strawman you. As soon as the precept strawmans you, you just need to ask if God designed them with ears that can listen and track truth, why the fuck aren't their ears working? The things that they think you said, you just didn't say. And that's unexpected if God exists. You would expect their ears to function. Chase Martin, thanks so much for the super chat. I work in string theory. There are many approaches to answer his question. He's asking questions he is ill-equipped to get answers to. It takes years to understand these questions, much less the answers. That's true. That's a really good point. Tyler and Gersall, thanks so much for the super chat. My brother-in-law, Randall, is a Christian. He loves to debate other religions, and I'm trying to convince him to debate you after his 18th birthday this month. Can you please challenge him into a debate? Randall, I challenge you to a debate. Stop running, Randall. Randall, you've been running for far too long. As soon as you turn 18, get up here, Randall. We'll debate about God. Relax with Russell. Thanks so much for the super chat. How don't they get that the Bible changing with the times is more so indicative of humans being responsible for this and not a timeless arbiter? I think you can like do like some running Randall indeed. I think you can do like some mental gymnastics for it. Like I think like the mental gymnastics that guy was doing, like, well, maybe it's part of like the big story. Maybe it's actually like better. Maybe the plot is better. Maybe the plot gets better. If it's, you know, like adaptation over time. But like, come on. Kim John Ultra, thanks so much for the super chat. I used to be indecisive, but now I'm not sure. Eat some shorts, thanks so much for the super chat. Simone Biles level mental gymnastics going on with this one. Yeah. Fuck. Stu. Thanks so much for the super chat. Half, answer, heaven and earth, one half. A, heaven and earth disappear. B, the smallest letter disappear from the law. C, everything is accomplished. So we would have 1, not A, which is heaven and earth disappear. So heaven and earth do not disappear implies not C. Everything is accomplished. Okay, sure. So if not everything is accomplished, okay, heaven and earth has not disappeared. If heaven and earth have not disappeared, then if not everything is accomplished, then not the smallest letter of the law disappears. Oh, maybe you're saying not A implies not B, not C implies not B. Sure, yeah, maybe like a strict if and only if for all three. If and only if heaven and earth disappear. Okay, wait, so everything is accomplished if and only if heaven and earth disappear, if and only if the smallest letter disappears from the law. Heaven and earth has not disappeared, therefore it's not been accomplished. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm with that. Eye and tooth rules were for Hebrews only. I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure the eye and tooth rules are indeed for any of the slaves. Anthony Bordalazo, thanks so much for the super chat. Ian, you need to check out the newly published Kantian Synthesis, BOFA and D's 2026 Journal of Philosophy. What's BOFA? If you want to learn about philosophy but you don't know where to get started, join the book club. We're reading Michael Huemer's Knowledge, Reality, and Value currently in the book club. We're on chapter 12, which is Personal Identity, wherein Michael Huemer endorses the soul. I hope everybody's ready for the soul. You know, you love the soul. There's no running from the soul. It's at Saturday, 8 p.m. EST. Other than that, my good friend, he's an up and comer. Probably haven't heard of him. His name is Justin over at the Deconstruction Zone. You know, pretty small channel. You know, he's live currently. You should all go raid him. I'm heading on out. I love all of you. Have a good time. I'll see you all tomorrow.